Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about a film that, at least as of this moment, that you can stream right now on HBO Max. This film had a theatrical release back in September. I unfortunately didn't get around to seeing this film in theaters. To be honest, too, the trailers really didn't do anything for me for this movie, but it's one of those films where thankfully um, the trailers don't give away too much. I kept hearing buzz about this. I kept hearing about people that were putting on like their top 10 favorite films of the year and just really absurdly great things about it. And so it's just one of those things where one night I wanted a movie that I really wanted to watch. I was kind of in a movie night mood and saw that it was on HBO Max, kind of wanted to give it a try for myself. And here we are. I'm going to review Barbarian for you today. So in this film, you guys, what I'm also going to do in this review, just to really play it safe, if you have not seen Barbarian, is as always, I'm going to keep it spoiler free. But certain details I'm going to provide are going to be very broad, both in my positive and negative comments and the way that I describe the plot of the movie. Just so if you have not seen the film at all, make sure you go in as clean as possible. I only saw the two trailers that were released online before the film came out, or roughly around the time the film came out, and that's really all you need to kind of know about the film going in, and also know going in that it also goes in completely different directions that the trailer does not tell you about, and that's kind of what's unique about the film. So let's kind of go over what Barbarian is about. Basically, the main plot of the film I can tell you without spoiling anything kind of before the real plot of the movie starts to kick in is basically this young woman is about to go in for a job interview. It's in Michigan somewhere, and so unfortunately she has to go to this bad part of Detroit in Michigan, where it's this bad neighborhood where all these houses are in really bad shape. They really are not in good livable situations to be in. It's really a bad neighborhood. And so there's an Air B&B she booked there because the interview that she has to do for this job is very far away from where she lives. So basically, she gets this Airbnb late at night. The job interview is literally the next day, so she has to stay somewhere for the night before the interview happens, and she gets there only to find out that somebody is already renting out the Airbnb, and so basically the two of them have to work something out. Once you know there's a convention in town, so a really big like medical convention of some kind. So almost all the hotels in the area are completely booked up. So basically, her and this guy come to the conclusion that, well, you stay for the night. I'll give you this extra bedroom that this house happens to have, and I'll sleep on the couch. And so they kind of get to know each other, and they both go to bed. And shortly after this happens, as this woman's trying to get some sleep for the interview for the following morning, bumps in the night happen. There's certain things that are very kind of startling, very scary. Her door opened in the middle of the night while this, I think, the Bill Skarsgard character that's staying in the house with her is having like this weird little freak out and stuff. And so over the course of this film, we figure out what exactly is going on with this house. What exactly does Bill Skarsgard have to do with the house? And what kind of dark history of of other people that have lived in the house, what they've experienced, and what exactly that's going to do to the two people that are currently renting it out as an Airbnb, and just the dark history itself of what this house has gone through over the years. So unfortunately, that's about the most I can tell you without spoiling anything in the movie. Like I said, the film really kicks in when the basement gets explored. That's all I'm going to say beyond that. So once the basement gets explored, that's when the plot really starts to kick in for this movie. But overall, guys, I was very pleasantly surprised with Barbarian. It's one of those films, one of those few times in film history where the trailers really didn't do anything for me. I thought it was just going to kind of be this generic fall release movie where you kind of could guess everything that's going to go on in the movie and things like that. Barbarian is not that movie at all. It's definitely one of those films where um, I would even say if you were not impressed with the trailer, I would say check it out just because the film that you actually experience is very different than what the trailer provides for you. The trailer kind of gives you the first basic 15 minutes of setup of the movie. And it's about an hour and 42 minutes, and it's an hour and 42 minutes of turns and guesses and directions that you would never expect the film to go in. So let's go over some positives and negatives of why I really like Barbarian. Well, it's also not a perfect film either, but we'll go over some negatives as well. But why I really was pleasantly surprised with this movie, and would highly recommend you see it if you're a big horror film fan. So first and foremost, Barbarian will always keep you guessing. That's probably my biggest compliment I can give this film. I really had no idea what direction this film was going in. There's one point where like, okay, this maybe it's about a crazy guy and he's trying to drug the girl and stuff, and it is not about that at all. Like I said, the second this woman explores this basement is when the film really starts to kick in. It will always keep you guessing. There's a lot of hints and possible directions you think it might go in, but the second you think that you know where the film's going, it goes a completely different direction again. It will always keep you guessing. It's just one of those films where, sometimes you'll go into the film and you'll know exactly what you're about to get in the story, but this time around you will not know what you're going to get into. And that's kind of what's pleasantly surprising about it is you want to watch the whole thing because you don't know where it's going and you want to see where it's going to go. I also thought the suspense of the film was very effective. There's also a lot of creepy environments that the film explores, both the Detroit area, kind of the bad parts of it, and just this house in general. This house in general just has a lot of creepy stuff about it, specifically when we get to the basement stuff in the movie. It's just very effective in its suspense, very effective in its creepy environments, and both were just very effective on me as far as a creepy film experience went. And this one's kind of a pretentious positive of mine, but I really do think this is something I was thinking. I was watching the film, and I want to give this film this compliment because this was exactly what I was thinking while watching the movie. The music of the film kind of reminded me of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, and the way that it looked reminded me of a Stanley Kubrick movie. Just the hallway shots and the way that certain shots were framed, and that how Kubrick was all about perspective in his movies, and how your eye was always looking towards a certain direction, the way he framed the shot. And I also thought the suspense was very much in the vein of what Alfred Hitchcock would have done if he was still alive. How he would set you up, get you comfortable with something, and then the second that a character goes in a dark path, or the second that a character goes down a room that you were very scared for them to enter, he's not afraid to show you those really scary things. The way that he did when Psycho first came out. We got to know Norman Bates first before the really creepy stuff started to kick in. So just a lot of things from classic filmmakers that this filmmaker applies here. I do not know the director's name, unfortunately, offhand, but just the way he handled the music, the way he handled the look and the cinematography of the film, and the way he handled the suspense, all felt like something that we would have saw from Stanley Kubrick or Alfred Hitchcock back when they were around. And that really says a lot. There's not a lot of filmmakers, I feel like, today that use great filmmakers like that to kind of set up their film and how the film is going to look and things like that. So big thumbs up to this movie for using a lot of Stanley Kubrick and a lot of Alfred Hitchcock to make their film even better than how it probably looked on paper. And for the most part, this film does focus on likable characters. I thought the lead actress of the film in particular was very likable. You really were rooting for her. You really were hoping she would land this job that she was out in this really bad part of Detroit to have to interview for. The Bill Skarsgard character, we learn a little bit about him and how we think he might be a villain of the film, but he's really not. And there's a character that Justin Long plays that's also a lot of fun throughout the film that really brings a unique perspective of the film, brings a little dark comedy into the film as well. So for the most part, the film focuses on likable characters. It's not one of those horror films where you have to follow characters that you don't like throughout the entire runtime. For the most part, these characters are likable, and we want them to succeed and get out of this terrible situation that the film throws them in throughout the movie. I also like how this film doesn't feel too studio mainstream. It doesn't feel like jump scare haven. It doesn't feel like just something that the studio would poop out at some point in January or at some point in the fall. It just, even though the film was released in the fall, it does feel more like an actual filmmaker made the film that didn't have any kind of studio interference while making it. And that's really refreshing to me. It's really great to see films that still get made today that don't feel like they're just trying to follow the mainstream to get by. It really does feel like its own film, that it's able to kind of tell stories the way that auteur filmmakers got to do back in like the 70s and 80s. So I like when I can see more auteur filmmaking happening, more original films get made, and it doesn't have to feel like it's being bogged down by studio interference or the studio mainstream that's going on with the genre at the time. I also feel, and this is, I think a lot of horror films do this already, but I think this film really does this well, where the film does depict the dark side of humanity. And what I mean by that for this movie, if I can get my throat doesn't give out, is the film does show kind of how dark people can get when the second the door closes, the second they're in their home, the second that they feel that they can get away with a terrible thing. And I feel like the film depicts the dark side of humanity in a very effective way, just in a way that really kind of chills you to the bone, where it's definitely a real world problem that's happening, and the film addresses just how we sometimes allow this to happen a little too much, and that it's really unfortunate that things like this, that this woman and these other characters run into in this house that they rented out. And so I think the film depicts very successfully the dark side of humanity and how creepy it can be. But for my negatives of Barbarian, for the most part, I feel like the story is a little disjointed at times because we are getting many different perspectives of how the story's playing out, how we really, once the big reveal happens, or once the several reveals happen in the course of this movie, we got to get to know the lead character. We got to get to know where the Justin Long character came in. We have to get to know the history of the home and one of the first homeowners that really kind of turn this film into, or to turn this house into the really dark place that it is. But as a result, it feels very disjointed in a way. I would say three of these main stories that the film tries to provide for us. We have the one with the girl that feels probably the most mainstream out of the three. We have the story with Justin Long, which kind of feels like a mid 2000s comedy around the time that he did like Live Free or Die Hard. And then we get another story about the one of the original owners of the home and how that's kind of where the house took a turn for the worse and how it's in the place that it is now. And even though all these stories do connect eventually, it does feel a little disjointed because, like I said, one feels like a comedy, one feels more like a mainstream horror film, and the other one feels kind of like a getting to know psychologically inside the mind of this really terrible person that started something terrible with the house. And as a result, because it is three different kind of perspectives being told, the film feels a little disjointed, even though they do connect by the end of the movie. And also, for the most part, I feel some of the story follow-ups, they don't happen enough in the movie. Like, we get to see why the girl's staying at the house with the job interview and things like that. We get to see um, how Bill Skarsgard's character is, kind of the fate he runs into with the basement. We get to meet this character that knows a lot about the house, even though he's never really stayed inside of it, and kind of his story of him in this neighborhood. And there's really not a lot of story follow-ups. Like, there's just enough there where we kind of understand why everybody's here and how they got to know this house. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of story follow-ups where we get to kind of see the fate of this girl going after this job and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's just one of those things where by the time the film was over with, there were certain story follow-ups I was hoping to get to know if possible. And also, for the most part, the film is not for everybody. There is a lot of disturbing content in this movie. It's one of those films where if you're squeamish with R-rated films or horror films, I don't think this is the place to start. There is a lot of squeamish and disturbing content thrown at you in the movie. It makes the film very effective. Like I said, there's a lot of dark turns the film takes that I was not expecting at all, and I'm sure a lot of people will not either. But go into this film knowing that it's not going to be for everybody. There is a lot of scenes that are very dark to witness, and it might not be for the squeamish out there. And there's some characters that do kind of feel like plot devices. I won't say which character in particular, but there's one character where the second we get to know what the film is really going to be about, we kind of find out that one of these characters is just kind of used as a plot device to get the story going and to make sure that some of the lead characters get more to do throughout the story. So there is a couple characters here that do feel like plot devices that don't really go anywhere, unfortunately. But overall, I'm going to give Barbarian a 9 out of 10. I was very surprised by how great it was. A lot of twists and turns I was not expecting. A little disjointed at times, like I mentioned in my negatives, but for the most part, this is a film you absolutely have to check out. 9 out of 10. If you're a huge horror film fan, be sure to see this one. 9 out of 10 for me. I was very pleasantly surprised with Barbarian.